agility is what's actually the fuel right now for AI.
To leapfrog, you need a solid foundation to jump over, okay?
In the leapfrog economies, ones where they have the opportunity because they haven't got all the legacy built out.
Give me hope. I want to be able to leapfrog anything in order to do what I want with AI.
Lindley, we're back.
Yes.
Look, AI clearly is, here now, here to stay, and it's accelerating, and it's crazy.
Yeah.
Right? But in every one of these technology waves, the truth is, some countries get ahead, but others actually leapfrog, don't they?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, what's really interesting to see is that countries that perhaps the West ignorantly had left behind in terms of what they thought the frontier of AI might be are leapfrogging. They're jumping ahead, and actually because they understand and they're skilling the population so that actually, hey, they have incredible skill, incredible understanding, and developing new areas of technology that could come in later on. I mean, it's really interesting. It's a complete change. It's a swap around that if the West isn't careful, they may rue the day.
Yeah, absolutely, Linda. I think the one thing I say to people is this: look, the advantages of AI aren't only going to go to actually the richest countries. It's actually going to go to, in some ways, the fastest learners. And that's a very, very different sort of complexion, isn't it, to how the industry is going to be working? Because I think the assumption is that the rich countries, the big countries kind of out there are going to run away with this.
Yeah.
But actually, it's a huge opportunity here, isn't there, for actually organizations, countries, and groups of people really who, in some ways, have been left behind.
Yeah, this is not the normal conversation that so many people have about how dominant 7 US companies will be, or how dominant the Chinese AI industry will be, how many research papers they put out, how many research papers they put out, who's going to fail. This is about the tortoise and the hare. And the people who you thought were slow are actually considered. They're educating young people earlier on. Yeah. They're educating them in most relevant areas. And that's really important, because if we don't get the attainment gap narrowed in, I live and work in the UK, you work across the world. If we don't start to educate and bring people in from an earlier age, and that's universally, we're going to have a problem. And the problem will be we fall behind.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think in some ways the big question is, why is it that with previous technologies, if you think about it, most of the big transformations happen in the past have always accrued and sort of landed with the rich, right? Yeah. It's always been capital intensive. What's different this time? And why should people even believe this? Why should, someone listening to this believe that actually there is a difference and there is an opportunity here? Yeah. And I think for me, one of the things I think of is that, AI is creating actually right now a situation where, those kind of legacy infrastructure type, barriers that people had in the past, the kind of capital you needed, and even things like just the setup and the processes that are built up over the years are now actually not barriers anymore.
So it's a startup mentality.
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. And I think right now, what's actually favoring and actually creating this opportunity is that agility is what's actually the fuel right now for AI.
So who's agile? Who's doing it? Who's starting to come through as a nation or an area where this is starting to show its face? I
think surprisingly, most people don't talk about Africa, the global south, and the likes when it comes to AI.
Unless you know.
Unless you know. I mean, we are talking, and we talk a lot about obviously what's happening in the US and what's happening in China, of course, as the rest of the West. But actually, there are very interesting things going on at the moment in Africa, as an example, in Asia. Yeah. There's a lot of things. And one of them that comes to mind is it's actually just a mid-sized healthcare, or maybe a health tech kind of organization that they've come out with this diagnostic system, and there's nothing too rocket science about that, but I think the process was important.
Right.
The fact that they didn't have all that legacy, they weren't a global giant. They didn't have all the capital, the sort of superpower type intelligence that you would have in some organizations in the West. But they had agility. They had the ability to actually execute, to actually move. And what they did was very, very quickly, they built out a system that was reliable, that doctors actually trusted, that was actually able to be rolled out and adopted within record time. So I think that's the model what we're seeing. I don't know what you're seeing in your kind of world. I know you're kind of out there as well. And
I've worked with a lot of very large medical firms, med tech companies, and I've been in operating theatres where surgeons, brain surgeons, cardiovascular surgeons have worked with the brand new bit of tech. The brand new bit of tech surrounds you with screens, and you can go in with your little tools, remotely, kind of in terms of sort of a keyhole surgery, and you can do things that you couldn't do before, not without opening up the skin, opening up the body. And of course, the wound left behind is smaller. Now, the thing about those was they were big medical firms. This, what you're talking about, is almost like the big powers are the brute force, the brute commercial force. And they put out understandably, a mass of new systems and new ideas. And they are the talking point for every other country. But the agile ones, the ones who are focused, the ones who look at the outcomes, the ones who look at how you're going to help. You have a good idea. You think why. You think about the values. You think about the value for maybe a smaller audience. Spot on. And what you're doing then is you're not getting stuck in the noise. You're actually cutting through that stuff. And there's a scheme in Finland, and anyone who knows me knows that I'm quite a big fan of Finland and education, where the scheme is called Elements of AI. It's a free course. Okay. And what they do, they educate younger and older people in what AI means and how you can apply it in your own life. And it's a really interesting thing. It's in English as well. If you speak English, you can get a copy of that. It's really interesting, open website. And what it's done, it's brought up, the attainment gap has been narrowed. And the attainment gap has been narrowed on this, what seems to be a smaller scale, but really important, by bringing up women who perhaps are less into the idea of AI in certain parts of the world, and it's brought them up. It's radically brought them up to be almost even with men in terms of the adoption of of AI. And I think that's amazing, because if you want to narrow the attainment gap, you get results.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's really interesting you mentioned Finland. I actually used to live there, for those who know. And I see a lot of progress in some of the initiatives kind of out there. But I think one of the things also to bring us to life would be just to compare, previous revolutions in some ways and see what Leapfrog actually feels like, right? And I think I can think of 2 or 3 that immediately come to mind. So I think mobile phones in Africa leapfrogged completely landlines.
Right? Because of infrastructure, but you found a workaround.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they didn't actually have to go through the growth pains that landlines actually, created in the West. Yeah. It was very, very similar with solar in Southeast Asia, when they leapfrogged a lot of the kind of fossil type based economy. And I think also in Latin America, there was a situation where they actually looked at, should we grow the financial services area just like, obviously the West has done, but instead actually went down the Fintech route. So they cut through that and actually leapfrogged again from that perspective. So there's tons of stories like that and tons of different analogies. And I think, AI gives us that again, an opportunity, but is not to be taken for granted.
No. One of the key factors and the common factors to anyone who leapfrogs, and if you don't understand the phrase leapfrogging, it's basically when somebody stands, puts their hand near their toes, and somebody uses their back to jump over them. Okay, that's what leapfrogging is, in case it's a term you don't know. But whether you do or not, it requires support. It requires collective thinking. It also requires thinking differently. It's a new mindset. It's a way to use the constraints against the person who has that infrastructure. And so that's really interesting. It really is a mindset that allows you to work around the problem that you have.
Yeah.
So, do you think that, look, we talked about an arms race, a commercial race earlier on in the series, and I wonder whether this time around we have found a way to level out the arms race.
In a way, and I think I did sort of drop this in, didn't I, just now, that I think it's something that we need to be careful that we don't take for granted. I think that, I picked up something. I mean, I've been concerned about this, to be honest, for at least a couple of years now. Yeah. But I think that, if we're not careful, the opposite effect is actually going to happen. And the UN is talking about this now, talking about this idea of the next great divergence, they call it, right? And I think the problem with that is that, the natural cause of events is really that this big economies run away with it. Yeah. And actually what you create is, a huge divide beyond what we thought about in terms of the digital divide kind of occurring. But the opportunity is actually there's two different economies actually forming. And one of them is the legacy economies actually building out and actually just growing because they've got all the capital, they've got all the, got the funding, they got all the big markets, they got all the investment. But the opportunity also sits on the other side with what I'm calling the leapfrog economies, ones where they have the opportunity because they haven't got all the legacy built out. So they're able to scale much quicker just by learning quicker than others. And I think that's a big advantage.
So if we look at the future in terms of where the greatest new developments come through, I mean whether or not it's small ones, whether or not it's just really useful use cases, whatever it might be, to leapfrog, you need a solid foundation to jump over. Okay, and if the Western economies and the Western businesses, America in particular, China in particular, come through with the only place to leapfrog over, so they have a monopoly on the market, we've got a problem because nobody can start to come through with new solutions. But is there a possibility that this divergent economy, this thing that we can all use, is there enough power in the countries and regions and ideas outside the big ones that it would be possible to do it? I mean, give me hope. I want to be able to leapfrog anything in order to do what I want with AI.
Yeah, I think look, and it's an important thing that you raise, because I think hope is really required here, because if what the UN is concerned about actually does happen and economies diverge in the way that they're thinking, then we're not heading in a good direction, should I say, globally, right? And I think but the hope comes from the fact that there was one thing different about AI, is that it doesn't actually reward power. What it rewards is clarity. And by that, what I mean is clarity of purpose, if you like, clarity of data, clarity of your process, but actually, perhaps most importantly, clarity of your values. Why are you doing what you're doing? What is it actually how is it going to benefit yourself, your community, your country, your region, right? And how do you balance off, again, you'll be surprised me saying this, the trade-offs and those things that actually work against you whilst you're focused only on the kind of benefits. So I think it's important to look at that, look at the societal priorities that you actually have, put those on the table and actually look across that. With that clarity, you actually have the foundation you require to actually leapfrog.
Anyone who claims to have a disruptive mindset had better listen to the countries coming through who are disrupting you without you even noticing. If we don't do that, this AI economy is going to be a very limited version of what we all hope it will be, which is flourishing, exciting, useful to us, and hopefully for the greater good.
Absolutely. I think the opportunity here is that AI gives really now a foundation for almost new powers to emerge, right? And I think that's a good thing. But again, we need to be careful that this isn't taken as something that is going to happen by default. It needs, we need to put the work in. We need to put the actual energy into actually, first of all, defining what that new world kind of looks like for us, and actually putting the right sort of foundations in place.
Well, as always, great to see you, Edosa. And, we really are hacking away at some of the issues around the development of AI, but also how we're interacting with it. So I think that's, I hope it's valuable to you, whether you're watching us or listening to us. It's so important that we have this conversation because we know the importance of this technology, and what it's going to do to us is really only guesswork at the moment. But I think we're starting to see the signs. Hopefully that's useful to you.
Absolutely. And it's interesting how getting together really helps us nail things down, doesn't it? And this last one was testament to that. It was really, really able to pack in within a short space of time, dissecting critical issues and issues that actually matter to a lot of people, as you've been saying to us, actually. So that's has been incredible. And what I'd like to say as well, lots of people have been asking how you can support the podcast. Now, what we'll ask you to do, if you can, is subscribe, share, because actually that's what gets the message across. And that's the whole point of this in the end. So really encouraged by people who are already doing that. And let's keep doing that. Let's keep having those conversations. But sadly, this is all we have time for on this episode. It always feels hard to say goodbye, but that's it. That's all we have. And looking forward now to the next one. But for now, it's goodbye from me. Yeah, thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for listening. And it's goodbye from me too. Take care. See you soon.